After doing over 100 graphite pencil drawings workshops to almost 2,000 people across South Africa, there are two questions that I get more often than any other. Peter, why is my blacks not as black as yours? And how do I get rid of that nasty graphite shine? What's up everybody? I'm Peter van der Merwe and I'm a professional graphite artist. So, why aren't you able to get your blacks, black? You see, pure graphite as an element is dark grey, and the various forms it gets molded into for the use in fine art basically only offers you a selection of greys. And this is evident when referring to the HB grading system in pencils. Standard graphite pencils, in their standard form, is a combination of graphite mixed with a certain ratio of clay. This is what gives them their various hardnesses and tonal values. The higher the number H, the higher the clay content in the graphite core. The higher the number B, the lower the clay content in the graphite core. Clay is hard and it's light. Graphite is soft and it's dark grey. Thus, a soft pencil lays down more dark grey than a hard pencil. There is no real black graphite in its purest form, so achieving pitch black with graphite isn't really possible. Now, I know there are various products available like the Pitt Graphite matte pencils and carbon pencils that gives you an almost black appearance. But the cores of these products have been manipulated or combined with other elements to give that darker appearance. And even though it works, it comes at a cost. It influences the effectiveness of toning and blending techniques, and they are usually not nearly as easy to manipulate on paper as standard graphite. It's also important to remember that these products have a very different appearance on paper, and when mixed with standard graphite, it's immediately noticeable. But I digress. This in itself is a subject for another video. Let's, for the sake of this video, say that you are a graphite purist like me, and you prefer to stick with the old trusty pure graphite product, such as your standard pencils, your mechanical pencils, polymer leads, graphite sticks, etc. Then we are faced with the reality that, there is no black graphite. And what makes things even worse is that the graphite has a natural reflectiveness. And that reflectiveness translates onto our paper when laying it down, especially in the darker areas. So basically, the medium actually works against itself. Now I can end the video here and just say, sorry, it's graphite. The best you'll get is dark grays, and you'll have to work with that shine and figure out how to incorporate it into your drawing. However, I've been working with graphite professionally for the better part of 10 years, and I've figured out a way to get much deeper blacks and almost zero reflection. And today, I'm going to show you how. So, what is the secret? Well, it lies in the preparation of your paper. Instead of changing or mixing your mediums, there is a specific way that you can manipulate the paper you're working on to counteract these natural limitations of graphite. Before I dive into this, it's important to know that I'm making another video on selecting the best paper for graphite drawing. Luckily, most of you watching this video has already attended my workshops or read my ebook where I explain paper selection. So you'll be well aware why today we'll be working with watercolor paper. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to use a wet method and apply water on my paper, followed by a form of sanding to manipulate a few technical aspects of the paper. These changes made to the paper is microscopic and will allow the graphite to react differently to the paper and appear darker and less reflective. The paper I'll be using today is my personal paper of choice, the Arches Aquarel 356 GSM hot pressed. Why hot pressed? You'll have to watch my paper selection video to see why I personally prefer hot-pressed paper. However, the paper tooth you choose will not necessarily have an effect on this method's outcome, as long as you use 100% cotton watercolor paper. The first reason why this wet method is applied is actually a very simple one. The Arches paper I buy comes in a roll. It's not a flat sheet. And if you've ever worked with a 356 GSM roll of paper, you'll know that it is an absolute mission to get them flattened out because of their thickness, their strength, and its memory to maintain that rolled up shape. The wet method, however, makes it a breeze. Here is what you're going to do to get it flat. Tape or clamp the available edge of your paper roll down to your table. Unroll the paper and tape or clamp the other side down. Once your paper is secured and open, you are ready to apply the wet method. Next, you're going to spray some distilled water over the entire surface of your paper. I love using a spray bottle with a nozzle. Now, you want to highly consider using distilled water for this process so that the paper does not get infected with chemicals that can yellow the paper over time. Once the surface of the paper is covered with water, you are going to use a sponge to evenly spread the water across the paper. I love using a clean dishwashing sponge, the soft side, not the scratchy side. As the paper absorbs the water, it relaxes the cotton fibers, and you can almost immediately remove the tape or clamps, as your paper will be flat. When you use the sponge to spread the water across the surface, you now have an opportunity to make a vital change to a very specific property of the paper. Spend a little bit more time with this process, applying more pressure to the sponge to lightly sand the paper's surface down. This process will microscopically break down the surface fibers of the cotton and form grit on top of the paper's tooth. Now note that I'm mentioning grit on top of the tooth. It's not the same thing. The tooth of the paper is molded into the paper when manufactured and isn't affected when doing this. In my paper selection video, you will clearly see the difference in paper tooths. The grit I'm referring to is a microscopic fiber forming on the tooth when the paper is sanded with a wet sponge. You can kind of think about it as adding a 2000 grit sandpaper texture on the surface of your paper without changing the specific hot pressed tooth. So your next question might be, when do you stop? So as you're spreading the water and sanding your paper with your sponge, you will start noticing some white mesh forming. This is an indication that the fibers on your surface are breaking loose and your paper is pretty much ready. Ensure that the entire surface of the paper gets sanded equally for a consistent grit throughout. You are only going to do this process on the one side you're going to draw on. No need to do both sides or to soak the paper right through. When this process is completed, you are going to dab the excess water off of your paper using a clean towel and leave your paper to dry for at least 48 hours. Once dry, you will immediately notice a difference on your paper. You can't really see it, but you most certainly can feel it. It has like a more scratchy fiber feel with a velvety look. It's very hard to explain. The microscopically broken cotton fibers dries in an upright position, giving the paper its extra grit. Another important thing that happens during this process is that the water causes the cotton fibers to expand, opening up the paper's natural pores. Now, why is this method so important, and why exactly does this make such a massive difference in the blacks and the reflections? Well, when graphite is applied to unprepared paper, the layers of graphite gets applied to a flat surface, creating a flat layer on top of that page. The graphite doesn't get absorbed by the paper and the graphite layers on top of itself. Light then reflects off of this flat layer, and that area looks very shiny. When you prep the paper, add a grit and open the pores of the paper, the graphite doesn't get layered on top of the paper as much. Instead, it gets absorbed into the paper's open pores. Let me explain. The new microscopic grit on your paper basically sands down your graphite core into finer particles. As you are rubbing your pencil across the page, you are working these fine pigments deep into your paper. So instead of layering your paper with graphite, you are unknowingly filling your paper with graphite pigment. Obviously, the thicker your paper, the more effective this will be. Hence the reason I use a 356 GSM paper. Now, another thing that is happening here is those microscopic grit fibers doesn't get flattened when drawing over them. They keep rising. Now, the combination of the graphite getting soaked up by the paper deeper into the paper pores and the light getting absorbed by the tiny little fibers eliminates those reflections and gives the graphite a much darker, almost pitch black appearance. This entire process is very simple to apply and it's very effective. It will allow you to execute a much higher quality graphite artwork. And that's it for now. I hope this little industry secret elevates your artistry to the next level. Thank you for your time and stay tuned for the next video. And happy drawing!